Hey, what is going on, everybody out there? This is Jakejames Lugo. Welcome to the channel and welcome to a brand new episode of A Definitive Discussion Rebooted, my podcast talk show where I have a bunch of different people from all over the place across the internet, YouTube, and a bunch of other cool places. We bring them in to chat up about a bunch of stuff, deep dive into some topics. If you guys have been enjoying the show, again, if you haven't checked out the last episode, which I had, was it someone from What's Poppin' over on the show, you guys definitely need to check that out. We talked about pops. We talked about collectibles. We even got into a little bit of some movie talk with DC and Marvel stuff over on my Patreon page, which, by the way, there's going to be a bonus EX mode that's an exclusive for the people over on Patreon, $1 level or higher. That's a supplement to this episode. But either way, let's dive right into this one. I have Dakota, who's the owner and I guess founder, CEO of Arcanic Artistry. Okay, he's an artist that I met when I actually went to Gamer Comic Expo, and he does these cool designs on wood that are also like different types of like game designs and other types of things that make coasters, I guess you could say like portraits or plaques or plates and stuff that's like really cool. So Dakota, what's good? Welcome to the show. How's it going?
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, again, I know that was like a MacGyver like bootleg way of describing what you do, so I apologize. But for
No, you're good.
But tell everybody exactly like what you do. Like, what are you all about?
So I make a whole bunch of laser engraved artwork from, like you said, coasters, wall art, and I'm expanding more into the tabletop RPG area with dice boxes and initiative trackers, dungeon master screens, all sorts of stuff.
That's cool. You see, that's a much fancier way of saying exactly what you do. Much better than how I described it, laser printed. I mean, it's just like got a nice ring to it and stuff. But
Yeah.
I saw you at Gamer Comic Expo. I saw a bunch of your designs. You had a big table, which was really cool. And I was like, oh, this is pretty dope. And then you were showing me some of the coasters and the other little things that you had on display. You cover a lot of different games. And I mean, a ridiculous amount for everybody that's listening right now. I mean, what are some of your favorites or some of the more popular ones that people usually check out? Because I saw Zelda. I saw a bunch of other Nintendo stuff. I mean, what's really, what's really the big kickers right now?
Typically, it just depends on either what's popular or what's funny or the classics that everybody likes. So at every show, I'd say there's a good deal of My Hero, a number of just gaming stuff in general, really. So, and you kind of tailor it to the show as well, guessing on what kind of guests and who's gonna be there.
Does that usually change from show to show, or does that change with like seasons or fads? Like right now, the big thing at the moment over the last few months has been The Witcher, because of the Netflix series. So I'm guessing
Yeah.
Witcher stuff is like a big deal. Witcher 3 stuff, in some way.
So yeah, surprisingly, I haven't had that big of a turnout for Witcher things at shows, but I've only been at 2 since the new year and the Witcher season dropped on Netflix. But it varies too. So before the Netflix came out, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, I know The Witcher, it's cool." But then afterwards, it did see an obvious increase in sales and even just interest in general.
Definitely. We got to get you some more Witcher stuff. We got to get you on that. So that way everybody could start walking around with the little wolf emblems on their coasters or different things like that. That'd be kind of cool. Now, tell me a little bit about the process of making some of these things. Because you said laser imprinted, the designs, they look real clean. They look real nice from what I saw anyway when I was at the show. I mean, tell me about the process of going through that. Is it tough? Does it take a long time?
In the beginning, it was a trial and ordeal because I would be designing stuff and kind of fiddling with the laser settings to get it all right. But the basic process is think of how a colored printer goes back and forth putting ink on a page, except this takes a little bit longer by going back and forth and burning away the material with a high-powered laser. So the designing time outside of that's always going to be the longest, but now that I've been doing it for nearly 3 years, depending on the design or something, it takes me a couple minutes to get something all together and ready to go.
Now, is that for like bigger pieces or smaller pieces? I know I saw a wide variety of stuff. Again, the coasters I saw obviously look like a coaster, for like a glass, I guess you could say however many fluid ounces you could put on that or whatever. If you're drinking like a beer, like a pint or something, that it would fit right on top of that stuff. But what about some of the bigger pieces? I mean, I'm pretty sure I didn't get to see everything there, but have you made like much bigger stuff that would usually probably take a little bit more effort and time?
Yeah, so one of my recent things is like the original Pac-Man map done into a design that you can kind of look into slightly, where it has the board and all the pack pellets and the ghosts and whatnot. So something like that took me 4 or 5 hours to put together. It's spread out over a couple days between like designing, rethinking, editing, etc.
So tell me a little bit about how crazy some of these things could get. I mean, what's the most wildest or the biggest thing that you've done so far for somebody or for yourself even?
So far, and I haven't put it to the laser yet. I'm going to be doing a 4 to 5 foot map of Middle Earth, split up
Oh,
into a big coaster set. So,
really?
or how I have the coasters designed, I should say. So I've cut them up the entire map of Middle Earth from Mordor to the Shire, where it's set in a hex design that looks really pretty. I like it. It's fun. And then I'm just going to take that, blow it up to about a foot each, and then cut it all together and slap it on my wall.
That sounds dope. I mean, that sounds like it'd be awesome to show in like in a way, like in a display, like behind you when you go to cons, because people look at it
Yeah.
and be like, "Oh snap, that's Middle Earth," and then they realize what it is. That sounds like it'd be a pretty big hit.
hmm And then the other big ones are probably the just taking any design and making it as large as possible.
I mean, what are some of the other big ones that you probably have done or plan to do at some point? I mean, have you gotten like crazy requests for anything specifically or anything like out of this world?
Not too much. So I had like a welcome sign be like 3 feet, and so engraving and cutting it all together is a little bit of a task at first. And then I'd say the next hardest thing to do is to do something with a bunch of layers going into it.
Now, this type of stuff getting cut, obviously, as you said, laser cut or whatnot. I mean, what are some of the tools that you end up using frequently for this stuff? Like, obviously, machines, pretty sure you do a little bit of work on the computer, correct?
Yeah, of course. Designing an Illustrator and then exporting it to the right file types and understanding like the color layouts and everything so it looks pretty.
Yeah. So tell me also, how does it usually sell when you go to events and stuff? Because again, I only saw you at one event, but again, you've gone to a bunch, before the new year started. Does it usually end up being like you have like a successful weekend? Do you usually have certain shows that are like real big hits for you, or does it fluctuate? I mean, what is that like?
Being only about 2 or 3 years in yet, and right around two of actually doing conventions, I'm starting to hit the same shows for the second year. And obviously, from the first time of me being there and having like 10 things out on display to having over 150 stuff, definitely a difference in what's coming out.
I mean, does it end up being tougher as you go to more shows, trying to set up stuff, trying to provide enough like inventory or stuff that you feel like is going to sell? I mean, what's that like?
Yeah, so that's always a challenge. Storage, getting it there, because it's not as easy to just take a plane and fly with a suitcase full of art prints. I'm looking into investing in like a big hauling trailer to pull everything, and then having the space and understanding the layout and knowing that I need to expand more vertically on displays to show people things has been a bit of a daunting task that I'm still trying to tackle.
So tell me a little bit about like maybe some of the tougher times, either at events or just trying to sell certain stuff. Was there ever moments that things just were like not going all too well? Like maybe you have to really kind of shift gears or course correct in some way, because maybe certain things weren't selling or certain things just weren't coming together, right? I mean, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it was. Can't remember the name of it exactly. It was some anime convention that was over in
In Florida or
Fort Lauderdale, I think.
okay.
Yeah, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And the trouble was trying to have a table space in an artist alley. So by that time, it was close to the same setup you'd seen. And at Gamer Comic Expo, I had a lot of space. But at that show, the tables were 2.5 feet wide, which is not a lot of the depth to put everything out on. They couldn't give us any more tables, and I brought my own thinking I could expand. So trying to compress everything into that space was hard because I would like take out a number of coasters and kind of just have like the most popular I thought. But then the problem propped up where a lot of people weren't seeing design, so they're just passing it over. So then like the second day of the show, we completely revamped it and had every coaster we could fit out on display, and that turned sales all around.
Now, when a problem like that arrives, or like when you have to deal with something like that, is that usually come down to because there wasn't enough space maybe in the dealer's room, or like you weren't able to afford to go to a dealer's room? Again, as someone that's a little bit ignorant of that process, because I usually go to events either as media or as a guest or as an attendee, I don't get to see that side of the convention or the event so often. I mean, is that usually mostly the problem when this stuff like that happens? I mean, is that like a regular occurrence?
Yeah, so everybody wants to save money any way they can. So an artist alley at a show is more for the upcoming budding talent. Typically, people can have a booth space that's under $300 in a good location, and they can fit everything there. But as I'm starting to expand and whatnot, the jump goes from like a $300 booth to a $5,000, $7,000 booth, and really debating, is it time to make that jump and hoping I get better returns for the show and cutting down profit margins and everything like that.
Is that usually for like the bigger shows? Because I mean, just thinking back on some of the conventions I've gone to, maybe the smaller ones, not like the Comic Cons or the Super Cons or like the Mega Cons types, like more like, you know, the smaller ones that are probably like those like 2 or 3 days, but they're not like these huge conglomerate conventions. Like, does that usually end
Yeah.
up being the same thing?
Yeah, same thing there. So a couple I've signed up for the next couple of months, their artist alley might be $175, but then any vendor space is 500 or something. So at this point, I've kind of decided it's worth the investment to go with the larger space, because instead of a 8-foot table and a 6-foot space, I get a 10 by 10 area to do whatever I want with.
That sounds like a lot of waiting. Because I mean, I can only imagine like when you weight things in the wrong way and you make the wrong decision, does that end up being really catastrophic?
Yeah. So far, I haven't had any trouble, so I'm crossing my fingers and knocking on wood that nothing goes wrong yet.
Yeah.
But I'm still hoping to continue expanding and growing upon that.
So tell me a little bit about what it's like going to these types of events and doing like what you do in your way. Again, you're an artist where you're selling your wares in to a couple of different ways, even though you're doing it a little bit differently than most upcoming talent. Tell me a little bit about the relationships or the way that you interact with other people that are other vendors there or other like, you know, artists and stuff that are selling their wares. I mean, is there usually, you know, a competitiveness? Because I always hear about that from events, you know, in various different places, or is it a little bit much more mutual and it's like passerby, a little bit more friendly? I mean, what is that like? Because I feel like a lot of people don't really get to see that side because they only see you guys selling your stuff and you doing work throughout most of the
Yeah.
time.
So I'd say there's two major sides of this. There's the vendors who sell Pop Funkos, who sell merchandise that they pick up and just resell, things like that. I would say those kind of people are in direct competition with one another. But then you go to the artists, you go to the craftspeople, you go to everybody who makes or designs their things and then goes to the conventions. They are all typically in the same boat. So they understand, like, this is my print or this is my art style, and we're all here to do each other better. Let's have a good time. But even in those vendors who are selling the same items, there's not really that much competition, but personality between person to person always changes. And then the other side is that, say, I always feel bad because at some shows, a lot of people don't do well just depending on the crowd. So Gamer Comic Expo was not a good show.
Oh, gee, I can
And
tell you all about that one.
yeah, most people just barely broke even, and I made enough to cover hotel, driving, convention costs because it was just all over the
You
place.
know
But then you
something?
have some
But
people who
before
did.
you continue, I want to add one more thing before you continue. Like, I can only imagine when it's something like that, where it's like, again, quote unquote, that catastrophic or that crazy, where it's out of your hands, where things like go wrong and you don't do as well or don't do well, period. When it's no, have
Yeah.
no fault of your own. I mean, what does that do to someone like you? I mean, what are some of the things that go through your head at that point?
Um, for a lot of shows, it's like, is it worth staying here? Is it? And then a lot of the time, I've seen so many artists just say, "No, I'm going. It's gone." So, uh, Gamer Comic Expo, half the vendors left by the end of the second day,
True.
or a good number of them. But then I'm always like, "Well, I'm here. I'm just gonna lose money, and I could always make a little bit more if I stay."
You
So
paid for it.
then, yeah, might as well sit here and just chill and make friends with everyone. So that's how, like, we got to talking. I talked to a bunch of the streamers. I made friends with a bunch of vendors, the dice people, and stuff like that to try and network myself too.
Yeah, that usually is probably one of the perks, you know, for any type of event, good or bad. I mean, what was that like for you, you know, especially starting out as you start to go to more events and actually show your stuff out to people? Was that easy at first or difficult? Because I always hear that it's almost always difficult for people, whether it's not so much like showing what you have, especially if it's good, but really just trying to break the ice with people to talk to them.
Yeah. So when you're first starting out, it's like, oh, a lot of imposter syndrome. So it's like, am I going to be good enough to do this event? Will people like my artwork? And all that stuff. And then those are the kind of things that you just have to fight through, regardless if you're at your first show or if you're at your 100th show. Because going to like Critical Role, for example, the dungeon master and voice actor Matt Mercer, he still has that imposter syndrome because that the idea of that you're just this successful, how do you think you get there? It's always something that could happen at any level of somebody.
True. Very, very true. And again, that is pretty much parallel to anybody in any discipline, especially with me, even, as a content creator slash game media or games journalist person, that idea of imposter syndrome, just trying to put yourself out there and just be like, yes, I could do this. When deep inside you're like, oh my God, I don't know if I could do this.
Yeah.
Everybody could relate to that in some way. And it's funny to hear it from you, who's in a totally different discipline and a totally different avenue of this type of stuff. Again, that's parallel to what I do. Now,
It's universal.
yeah, it's universal. Like, tell me a little bit also about going to the different types of events, because obviously we have, what Gamer Comic Expo was, which is kind of gaming and comics, enough said.
It was more of a showcasing event for Fortnite than an actual convention.
pretty much, if we're being honest here. But like, again, you got other events out there like the super cons, the mega cons and stuff. They're a little bit much more broader and generalized. And then you have your more specialized conventions, which are like sci-fi conventions or horror conventions. I mean, do you usually find yourself like really picking and choosing which ones to go to based on what you feel like you're going to sell the most of, for those types of like, audience members or those types of people?
Yeah, so I would say there's three main types of conventions with a very general definition. There's the mega conventions, which are we're being held at a convention center. You come here, you see celebrities, you buy stuff, you go home, or you see events and whatnot. That's your MegaCon, SuperCon, all those stuff. Then there's like hotel conventions that are Holiday Matsuri, a couple others, Anime Hawaii, which is a smaller one, things like that, where people come to party all weekend, purchase some cool things, and have a bunch of fun every which way. And then the third one is probably usually the smallest, and it's like the weekend market or one day things. So people are there specifically to just spend, and see all the cool stuff.
Now, I always wondered about that, outside of the convention scene, like these flea markets, these like little quick markets or these swap meets or swap shops that you would find, like, especially down in South Florida, because that's a little bit more abundant here than it is in other places. Do those end up doing well for someone like you, like actually deciding to go to them and actually selling a lot of stuff, or even, breaking even, or whatever the case may be, like maybe more or less so than some of the conventions, or no?
Yeah, so I've done 2 in the past 4 or 5 months, and so on average, say like a booth cost is Ocala Comic Fest in the mall was a 1-day show last week or the week before, and it was just a Saturday. You come up, set out there for 6 hours, and it was $50. That show paid my rent for the month. So
nice. That's dope.
So things like that, the little market shows, they do surprisingly well, even if there's not a huge crowd.
I'm surprised you don't go to more of them if that's the case, if it's that well, and that's a big payoff.
The struggle for my stuff is always going to be restocking, though, because a laser can only operate so fast versus a printer or a supplier who can ship in stuff.
So in that case, then this would be a good way to kind of cap things off. When you find yourself like dealing with that type of problem, which is a good problem to have when you really think about it. But what about when things go wrong, like malfunctions? Obviously, dealing with the laser, dealing with any other like technology, things are going to break down. I mean, does that usually obviously slow you down a huge amount, or do you have like a backup plan, or do you have to come up with a backup plan in case something goes terribly wrong?
Yes, absolutely. When I first had my first laser, it was functioning great for a year. I was doing the basic maintenance because I didn't know a whole bunch about the machine itself. And then I had my first breakdown. I was like, oh, this needs to fix. So then we picked up a second laser and then kind of retired that first one. And from there, I've learned the in and out of every single piece of metal or glass that's inside each laser. So I know how to replace it, identify what's wrong and what not, and to kind of make sure something's online all the time, or that I have enough stock. So if somebody says I need this, I can supply it to them whenever.
That's good. And again, I feel like that's important, especially for your profession where, again, if something like that happens, you have nothing to show for it. I mean, you're kind of assed out. That would be really,
and then it's a
really
couple
bad.
$1,000s to replace a missing machine.
Jeez. That's like people complain about game consoles and stuff. Imagine having to deal with that on top of rent.
Yeah.
That does not sound fun.
20, 30 orders come in from a month of a sale you had anticipated to do something with.
I would cry. I honestly would cry. I don't think I can handle that. You're going to have to pour me a pint if that happens. Yeah. But it's crazy. So anyway, Dakota, thank you so much for chatting up with me. Where can everybody else find you right now? You're on the social media right now with your stuff?
Yep. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all under Arcanic Artistry. Coming around in the couple weeks, arcanicartistry.com too. everything with that. And then coming in a couple weeks, we're nearing 1,000 followers on Instagram, so I'll be putting up details of a giveaway from there. And then hopefully in the next month, we'll be doing a Kickstarter for my new arcane coffer, trying to roll out whole new designs on that.
That's awesome. That sounds dope. Now, people order from you, or people go to your guys' stuff. I mean, they could have custom orders for like, specific designs that they want printed.
Yeah, anything and everything. So I handle most orders through my Etsy site, again, Arcanic Artistry, or people can just send me a DM and I can direct them from there.
That's awesome. Make sure you guys check that out. Show him some love. Send him some owl hugs because he's got a lot of dope stuff over there. Again, and maybe if you're at one of the conventions down here in South Florida, you'll probably see him over there. I'm pretty sure, you're probably going to go to a couple that I'm probably going to be at more than likely. I know there's some that I'm going to. I'm going to be hosting panels there, which I'll be talking about soon, guys. So I wouldn't be surprised to see you there. That'd be kind of dope.
Up on my website, I've got all the conventions I'll be at. I'll be doing more of the major shows, and then we're also expanding all throughout the southeast, and pretty much all of America. And then sometime in July or August, we'll be moving out to Arizona, so we'll be hitting West Coast shows as well.
Sweet. I think you're going to have a ball out there. That's going to be fun for you. But yeah, thank you so much for chatting up with me, guys. Let me know what you guys think about this episode down below in the comment section. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Give me your guys' feedback and who else you guys want to see on the show and what do you guys want us to talk about. All that stuff, put it down below in the comment section. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this stuff. And don't forget to check out my Patreon page. Remember, dollar level or higher that you join up with, you get a ton of exclusive content, including this bonus EX mode we're going to do right after this now that you're listening to it. So if you're just finishing up this episode right now at this point on YouTube, go check out Patreon because the EX mode that I'm going to talk with now, Dakota now, you'll be able to see it there. So anyway, we will talk to you guys again very soon. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.